Hi, everyone. Welcome to Halo, Love, and Country. Today, we're dealing with what LGBTQ people and the rest of the world deals with when they go into the military, although it's a little bit different for LGBTQ people. We have Dave, Lara, and Patrick McGrath, and myself. We were all in the Navy during the Vietnam era. These two guys actually got in the action. I was safe and sound at a naval hospital as a psychologist. But I'm going to ask each of them to kind of introduce themselves. And I'm just going to start just briefly say my story. I was an Army Reserve officer, then I was a naval officer as a medical service corps type. I'm bisexual. In the last podcast, you'll see I told a lot more of my story, what LGBTQ people from my perspective went through trying to survive in the military. But Dave will have a lot to say about that. Patrick, he's going to talk about his experience in Vietnam. But I'd like both of you guys to kind of introduce yourselves. My duty station was Bethesda Naval Hospital, Oak Knoll Naval Hospital, Long Beach Naval Hospital, and then when I was in the Army, I was briefly an infantry platoon leader, and then I was a transportation corps officer and all that. So that's kind of my thing. Would you guys introduce yourselves, each of you? Dave, you want to go
Thank
first?
you. Thank you. Okay. All right. My name's Dave Lara. I joined the Navy in 1965, and I was discharged in 1970. I joined the Navy so that I wouldn't have to go on the ground in Vietnam, but I didn't know what the job titles were. I became a hospital foreman, and I ended up in Vietnam 9 months later. I was lucky. I was aboard the hospital ship Repose. I did have to spend a few months in what we called it in country or on the beach. So I did see some combat, never in the jungle, but aid stations, Dong Ha, Da Nang, those areas. Anyway, that's the basic. I
Tell us the
came back.
name of your book.
The name of my book is called Zippo Boys, and it's the story of my time in the Navy as a gay man.
Patrick, tell us about yourself a bit.
Let's see. Joined the Navy right after high school. I was 18 then, just after I turned 18. I thought I would go into UDT SEAL training. I took my swim test in boot camp, and they gave me a category that I didn't even put down. And he says, "You're going to do what the Navy wants you to do." So he sent me to radio man school. I didn't like that. I didn't want to be carrying the radio man. I had my orders because I passed the bud test in boot camp to go to buds. And from there, I decided, well, I don't want to carry that radio. So I just flunked myself out of school. My master chief told me I was going to be chipping paint over the side of a destroyer. As a bosun's mate, I bumped into a yeoman down in the enlisted men's club, and he said, "Don't worry about that. I'll find your billet. It'll probably be in Vietnam." I said, "Hey, anything beats hanging over a destroyer's side and chipping paint." So he found me a billet from Inshore Undersea Warfare, a Harbor Defense Unit in Quy Nhon, RVN. And I was sent there as a E2. And when I got to E2, when I got to my base as an E2, they said, "You're not supposed to be here. There's no E2s allowed in Vietnam." Yeah, so they field pro me to E3. So I started working on the boats, 17-foot Boston whalers. At first I was on a 36 LCPL, 36-foot LCPL. And then we inspected junks for contraband and stuff and paperwork and IDs and all that stuff.
We're really talking about the risks, and you were about ready to get to that.
Yep.
And Dave, in his book, talks a lot about the risks of serving. And there's the physical risks, the emotional risks that everybody goes through, particularly if they're in combat. And there's special risks that LGBTQ people go through trying to serve especially during our era, not getting found out, having a social life, trying to advance in a system. Let's focus on that, Dave. Maybe you could talk about the risks that you dealt with in serving as an LGBTQ man.
Sure, sure. There was, I guess you could probably say that there's three risks that I had to deal with. First of all, was being a hospital corpsman. I had to deal with both the possibility of being in actual combat. Luckily, I didn't have to deal with that. But the psychological risk of dealing with the wounded and the dying, that was huge. In fact, a psychiatrist I spoke to said it might be worse PTSD wise for corpsman who sees death as much as I saw death. If I was to guess the number, I probably had to deal with about 200 dead men in my year in Vietnam. The other risks that I had to take, boy, the biggest one is just being possibly caught as being gay. At the time, it was illegal for me to even exist. We were either deemed psychiatrically damaged or criminal. And in fact, the criminal aspect of it in the military meant dishonorable discharge, time in jail, usually 19 months if you were discovered. And then the other risk was having no band of brothers. The band of brothers concept that you hear about today has to do with the fact that you were in a really horrible situation where the men around you would bolster you, keep you sane, allow you to do the things that you have to do in war. You had a shared experience with them, wives and children, drinking buddies, sports, whatever. As a gay man, I didn't have a band of brothers. And so that 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 group of men that could get you through those horrible times didn't exist for me. So I had to come up with mechanisms to give me that. And we can talk about that later if you'd like.
Sure. Patrick, could you talk about the risks you took being ashore in Vietnam and what happened?
Well, basically, I was on the boats, like I said, and our commanding officer was a World War II vet, and he liked to do things himself. The SEALs would come into the upper inner harbor, shoot the place up, and leave. Second up, they were on there. They lost 7 guys, and then they weren't coming back for a while. I don't remember when the whole team came back. And our CO decided to put together our own land team to deal with the upper inner harbor where the base camps were set up and supply routes for their units up there. So they asked for volunteers, and 8 of us stepped forward, and they sent us to the 5th Special Forces Recondo School in Nha Trang, and 2 of us away to the 9th Division Infantry Sniper School. And we all finished up school and came back and started our own team and operations up in the northern harbor. And we would do sweeps during the day, look for trails, bunkers, whatever.
What did you feel like was the main risk to you when you were doing those sweeps? What was
I had no fear of the jungle. I grew up in the woods at home. I was a deer hunter, and it meant nothing really to me to be out in the jungle. And with most of us in my area, it was mangrove swamps, islands. It was just a big maze. And they'd set up base camps there and float mines down, pushing them. A sapper would push mines down and attach them to the heavy shipping freighters. And that was our job, to stop that.
you were telling me about when you were in a night situation where the old man and the boy were coming by.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Is that okay to talk about that?
Yeah, I told you everything was open. Yeah, well, at that point, I was team leader, and I had I flew with bird dogs during the day to check out my area of operation. So I had discovered some new bunkers and trails in my AO from the overflights with the 203rd Bird Dog RAC unit stationed in Quinlan. So I picked my ambush spot for that night. I also got to prefix that with my whole area of operation was a free fire zone. Anything that moved from 6 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning was considered Charlie, and we just took anything out that moved. So I had 102 operations in a year and a half, 19 months that I was in Quinlan. And a lot of those operations were with a special unit, a Vietnamese unit, CSS unit, and it had two Navy advisors who were SEALs, and I usually got them to their objective. The first time they tried to get to their objective, they got hung up on sandbars. Like I said, it was just a big maze of islands. So on that particular night, I had my team set up. They had already gone from their second operation. We were sitting there about 4:30 in the morning, and we had set up our kill zone, and we saw a sampan coming down the canal with one personnel in it. And I waited until he got by us, alerted my sniper to get ready to take that guy out. There was one other person running down the canal on the other side of the canal in the mud flat. It was really dark that night. The moon had gone in. All I could really see was footprint splashes in the water. So I gave the order to my sniper to take the sampan out. He fired it first. His fires went around, took him out right away. I opened up on the footprints running through the mud with my machine gun, and I fired a couple bursts. Ceasefire came over the radio. Ceasefire, ceasefire, you're shooting civilians. And that can't be possible. I just couldn't fathom that. 4:30 in the morning, why would civilians be out there in a free fire zone? They know it's a free fire zone. So I took my radio man and we went across the canal to where the body was. Found out that it was a young boy. Couldn't have been older than 10 years old. I palpated his carotid and he was gone. He was chewed up pretty bad from my 60. And I asked over the radio after I popped flares at that point, he told us, the command post told us just to come back to base, leave the bodies there. So we did. They said they would be taken care of. When we moved back to the, I guess at that point, I was pretty numb.
How did that affect you, Patrick? What was the effect on you of that? How do you feel about it now? How is it for you now?
At that point, I died. My total psychological situation was I was numb. I think that was the last, even after I got transferred out of there to another unit, a duffel bag unit where I implanted sensors in Cambodia. I never made contact because we're not supposed to make contact. We're just supposed to get the sensors implanted. I was working for McV at that point, but I didn't have to fire my rifle there because we never made contact. We were sneaky peeking around, and we were not supposed to make contact. We had sensors on us that could get picked up.
It seems like you're less numb now, though. You're able to talk about it.
Yeah, I guess over the years I've made amends. I carry that little boy with me everywhere, every day. I talk to him. He's inspired me to do things I probably would. I think I saved in my lifetime 4 human beings from dying. I was on the ambulance corps in my hometown, and that's how I survived, knowing that I did some good after that.
Yeah, and you did. And you did what you needed to do at the time. And we send our soldiers, we send our Navy personnel, the Marines, into situations that are absolutely untenable. And they get hurt, and you got hurt. And he and the little boy died. I am sorry that you had to go through that you went through that. Thank you. Thank you for telling us. And you and I maybe can talk more about it too at another time. But David.
Absolutely, Richard. Anytime.
Yeah, appreciate you. David, for you, I guess we can see how Patrick got hurt. How did you get hurt during all this? I don't mean.
So when I got into Vietnam, when I first got there, they couldn't find my ship. It seems unusual to modern day individuals, but technology was not the way it was. So I got in country with a bunch of my fellow corpsmen from corps school, and we were scattered throughout Vietnam, waiting to meet up with our ship wherever it was. I got assigned to a base near the DMZ called Dang Ha. I spent less than 2 weeks there. I was working sterilizing equipment in the OR area, the OR tent of the very large aid station that was there at Dang Ha. It's odd because I get into Vietnam and literally I get into a situation where I found myself killing a Vietnamese Viet Cong. I was at an aid station, just hanging out in my section, and suddenly there were explosions going off around the camp. One of the corpsmen that I was with came in and said, "There's a sapper, there's hell breaking loose, blowing up wards, there's men being hurt, get ready." At some point, I sensed in this exterior area of the area that I was in, it was like a little patio, if you will, sandbags, really dark. People don't know what it's like to be in darkness, but it's dark. And I sensed that there was movement there. And all of a sudden, these Marines come around, get into that area, and start firing. And then I see it. There's a Viet Cong there. It's the sapper. They shoot him below the knees and literally just make him fall over. No support, bones gone. And the guy's still alive. And these Marines start making a joke. "Oh, what do you think? How long is he going to live?" I say he's going to live. You know, he's no good for intel. So let's see. I say he's going to be dead in 20 minutes. I'll make a bet it'll be, these two are bantering back and forth. And they finally just looked to me and says, "Hey, Doc, let us know later. Let us know who wins the bet." And they DD out of there. And I'm going, "What the fuck, dudes? Take care of this." I back up a little because I did see the Vietnamese before, the Viet Cong before they come in. And I'm gauging how far a Russian grenade's fragging would go. Would I be taken in when he tosses that grenade? He's just laying there, still alive. And I don't know why. And literally, I've been in country 9 days. But I took my K-bar, which every corpsman has one. It's a knife, about this long blade. And I killed him. I shoved the K-bar into his heart. I always wondered, I knew that Marines were getting wounded and dying. I could hear already the screaming Marines coming into the OR. Did I pity him? Was it, put him out of his misery? But in the end, I think I just murdered him. And that moral damage to me made me, when I got out of the service, completely forget about all the things that happened. I began to believe that I had made up all of this shit, that I imagined it all. And it wasn't until in 2002, I was getting a reunion together. And in fact, some of the guys that was on that journey with me in country at that point said to me at one point, "Dave, remember that night when that Viet Cong got into your area and he was, shot down in that?" And it all came rushing back. So in 2002 was the beginning of me beginning to remember all the things that had happened. And I began to descend into really bad PTSD. I lost my partner. I completely had such rage and anger. Anyway,
Did you
so that emotional damage was there.
did you decide you were a murderer?
Yeah,
Is that, yeah.
that was my end point at that point.
Yes.
Yes. So in the end, it is what it is, and I can't do anything about it. I have gotten control of my anger and that PTSD. I've got that in control at least. And that was just the beginning. That was day 9, and I was there for 13 months.
Wow. Both of your stories, both of them grabbed me. And Dave, that's a lot. Because sometimes we do things for mixed motives, you know? I don't know what I would have done in this situation. You know, there's somebody whose legs are all shut up, it's going to die. Maybe it's the humane thing. Patrick, you're on an ambush. Nobody's supposed to be out there during a free fire in a free fire area at that time of night. What if you hadn't pulled the trigger, and what if he had killed one of your friends? Dave, what if the Viet Cong had lived another 2 hours in agony? You know, what ifs, and we just do what. I mean, I've had nothing like what you guys went through. My wife was murdered during a home invasion thing. So I do all the what ifs of that. What if I had been home, you know? So I understand the agony of what ifs. And yet in the moment, you guys did what you needed to do. And you were guided. You had the most information you had, you knew. And can any of us put ourselves there? You know, not really. I mean, each of us, you were there and you did what you needed to do to survive, each of you. And our country puts you in that position, you know. That's the nature of being in the military. It's the nature of first responders sometimes. It's the nature of the people we ask to deal with the real tragedies. And of course, war is always a tragedy, no matter what. Well, Patrick,
Yeah.
did you get any physical injuries? Anything happen to you?
We were picking up 2 Army advisors off ashore up in the upper inner harbor. The boat coxswain was at driving, and we got hung up on a small sandbar. But we were close enough to shore. They waded out and hopped in the boat, and I pushed us off the sandbar. Just as I was hopping in the boat, we struck a mine in the water. We were in a 17-foot Boston whaler we used for our operations. We all went up 15, 20 feet in the air. I don't know. I can just remember just seeing blue sky, and I thought I would bought the farm, you know. So when I came down, I landed on the gunnel of the boat on my back, and that was the first sensation of being alive again, because it was extremely painful. I rolled off into the water, came up with my rifle in my hands, waiting for the next shots to be fired. I assumed it was a B-40 rocket that was fired at us. I didn't see it coming. We all flew up in the air. And I just machoed up after that. We towed the boat back to base because there was no gunfire coming, so we didn't know what the hell hit us. And when I got back to the base, I was in agony. I could barely walk. I had a bad back from some heavy lifting prior to that being out there. So they sent me over to the field hospital in Quignon, the Army Field Hospital, and in an ambulance. And they immediately put me in traction and shot me up with muscle relaxers. So I didn't know what was going on. And I got out in a week, back to my base, and they put me on light duty. Said, you just sit in a skimmer all day during your day patrols. That's light duty. But they didn't realize that every other day it's raining and we're going across the harbor on chop, and you're just pounding the waves, and that didn't help my back at all. So
How is it now? How's your back?
My back is pretty good, actually. Yeah. My disc between L3 and L4 is totally deteriorated, but I keep my abdominal muscles really strong, which takes up
Really
a lot of
helps.
weight. I feel myself feeling okay nowadays.
That's good.
Still work out in the gym, so it doesn't stop me from doing that.
And you're lucky.
Yeah.
David, did
I
you
never
get
had anything physically bothering me. I got hepatitis A. That was about it. No, it was mostly the emotional stuff that I had to deal with. And then, of course, everything that happened at the end, which is another story. So I was
Yeah.
lucky. I didn't get injured in any way like that. And
you were dealing with burn cases, I thought. Is that right, from coming off the aircraft carrier?
yeah, that's the USS Forrestal. A carrier was operating off of the North Vietnam Tonkin Gulf, and some ordnance went off. I went over on an away team to help with the injured, but by the time I got to the carrier, all of the wounded, all of the casualties, the living casualties, had been already scattered throughout other ships and back to my hospital ship, the Repose. So I was assigned to Graves, and that was gathering up all the burned and blunt trauma injuries that was a result of the ordnance explosions on the Forrestal. I guess that was June of 67. There was 121. My numbers might be wrong. We took on about 114 of that dead. When I got back to the tip, I made one run over and one run back, or one run over, coming back, and they sent me and a bunch of us down into the hold where we had the storage lockers, and we put the dead down there, 112, 114 body bags full of really badly burned sailors and pilots. And we spent 2 nights gathering forensics to get these boys home. We didn't have DNA. So we had to get labels of any intact uniforms off. We gathered all that information, put it into envelopes that had the body tag corresponding. But the real way to get them home was to plot their teeth. And on a burned man, you have to break open their jaw. If they weren't completely burned black, then you have a bloated body that you have to mutilate and cut in order to get chest spreaders in there so that we could break the jaw off and plot the teeth. That was 2 nights. One of my buddies fell out after just doing 3. I don't know how, but I shut off, and I did about 19. It's weird because, again, when I got out, with the end of my tour there and the death of a man that I was in love with, I shut all of that down, and I didn't realize that I had done all of that.
It was your way of surviving in the midst of
Yeah.
horror. Yes.
One of the reunions took me back to Washington, D.C. with the Repose Gang, and we went to the memorial of the Forrestal men. They were having a gathering at the same time that we were there. And I came in contact with those ship people, and we went to the special grave marker in Arlington. And that's when I remembered everything. And again, that's when that one guy, or it was a different one, he looked at me, goes, Dave, I fell out of after 3. I hear that you did like 18, 20. You did a lot. And I remembered every one of them then. And it was horrible. It was horrible we had to do. But we got them home.
Yeah, you did. You did a service for those families and for that young person. My God. And somebody needed to do it.
I
And
was
you
19.
showed up.
I
You
was
showed
19.
up and did it. Each of you showed up and served your country. Well, we're going to move away a little bit from the horror and go. I always want to say, well, we know the horror of war. Well, we really don't. And it's important, I think, for our country to be reminded of what it's really like, because the only way I knew what it was really like was hearing your stories as a psychologist. That's what I heard. I heard the stories of the Marines and the sailors coming back, and that had the effect of really making me know the reality on some level.
I don't make a distinction between the combat experienced veteran as opposed to like you. There's something that binds us regardless of who was in the battle and who wasn't. You know what we felt, and you know the fear because the potential was always there, even for you. So I never make that distinction to me. I know others do, but I don't. You, through some sort of osmosis, know exactly what we felt. And so don't apologize. You don't need to.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Good times. Good times. Good times. Good time.
Good time. Okay, well, so let's talk about LGBTQ people in the military a little bit.
Okay.
Each of you had your own experience with that from a different perspective. Patrick's the guy you were mentioning that came on to you. Was that a military experience?
That was after boot camp. Yeah, I was in Great Lakes, still at Class A school, Radio Man school. I was working out in the gym, and I wrestled in high school. And he asked me if I wanted to wrestle. A big, strapping guy. He was muscled out, but that didn't bother me because wrestling is a game of technique. So we started wrestling, and it finally came to the point where he was able to pin me, and then he just started kissing me. I don't know if the guy was actually, and thinking back at it, whether he was actually a gay man or he was just trying to dominate me and he was a bully. So in the long run, I don't think I ever associated that. I just left it up in the air. He was what it was.
Well, there's abusive folk
Yeah.
in the LGBTQ community, believe me.
Yeah.
Very well could be. How did that leave you feeling afterwards? How was that? What was your experience of that afterwards? Has that stayed with you?
Afterwards, I guess I just sloughed it off afterwards. I mean, it's still in my mind. It comes back if something makes me aware of that situation, but it doesn't harm me any longer. It made me pissed off for a while. I don't think I ever took it out on anybody, any gay man that I got to know in the future after that situation. I'm a pretty open-minded person and live and let live. I worked in Hollywood for a whole bunch of years. I had a lot of gay friends, and yeah, no, it never.
Well, and guess who was one of the most instrumental people in making Love and Country happen, our film? Patrick was there, trained some of our actors, helped build sets. He was a set builder in Hollywood, and he donated his time to Love and Country while we shot it in Arkansas. He drove equipment two ways across country? I mean, from Arkansas to California. Your service to the LGBTQ community has been major, man. So we appreciate that. David, what was your experience? You're one of the community here. What was it like for you?
So I talked about the Band of Brothers. But by the way, Patrick, I'm glad that you make a distinction between, and it's in straight world also, between the predator and then just a regular guy or a regular gay.
Yep.
Because in trying to find my band of brothers, I began to gather the gays that I was able to spot. The gaydar did exist even back then. And I write that it usually started with, "So you got a girlfriend?" That time in Dong Ha, I met two men right off the bat that helped me, or that I realized were gay. And when I left there, I found 3 more on the ship. And we conspired to get together really often. The first time was in Hong Kong, and that's where we formed what I called the group. It was our band of brothers. And we called ourselves the group based on a novel written by Mary McCarthy called The Group. It's a story about some Vassar women. They meet and follow their lives and their problems with men and job discrimination, sexism. In other words, like us. So my group, we got together in Hong Kong, Singapore, and in the Philippines. Not all of them together at the same time. I mean, not all the time, but a lot of the time, all 6 of us were there together. And that was the band of brothers that I existed. None of them were predators like what Patrick experienced. We were just a bunch of guys that just were trying to get through. And oddly, we were known on the ship. It's pretty hard to not notice. And so to you out there listening, as long as we were valuable and we didn't piss anybody off, we were fine. But the moment we came back to the world, back to the state, all bets are off. The witch hunts came after you. But in war, you don't care. As long as he's got your back, you don't care. And for better or worse, that's the way it was at that time.
David, did you find the Naval Investigative Service ever came after you or any of your friends?
In Vietnam, or on the ship especially, they were looking, but it wasn't aggressive. There was one gentleman who, a black man, who I stayed away from, our group stayed away from, because it was, racism and all of that. He was aggressively gay. And he got caught making out with a Marine one night on Liberty. And he was arrested, taken off the ship. He was sent to Leavenworth. And when the witch hunt caught up with me at Quantico, they told me that he had died at Leavenworth, and that if I didn't give names, that I was going to be going to Leavenworth also. Yeah, it was extortion, threatening. What was it? It was torture. It was torture to me to give up names. I'm not bitter. In the end, I got more from the military than what they took away. It was a good time. The group in Vietnam, it was a good time. And some of us got together in Washington, D.C. and we had a good time. I can't be angry about all of that. It is what it was. I am a product of that era. And in fact, the modern gay rights movement was created by the Vietnamese War. There was a draft. Everybody was being swept up in it. And there were more than one, the group in the military. You know damn well there was. There were gay men coming together all the time in secret gatherings and secret bonding. And when they did get us and discharged us in the Navy, you ended up at Treasure Island in San Francisco. They'd call your wife if you were married. They'd call your parents, or they'd call friend, and they'd let them know that you're getting discharged for being a faggot. You couldn't go home. You couldn't go back to your wife or children. They dumped us there in San Francisco. And guess what? San Francisco, in the 60s, the center of the gay rights movement, because they all dumped us there. That's my theory.
I was probably part of that process. I got gay men. Here I am, bisexual, and I got gay men sent to me as a psychologist at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital.
I think you were my psychiatrist.
There, I probably was.
1969, 1970. I was at, no, it was Bethesda. I thought I was at Oak Knoll, but that was before any of that. I'd confuse you. But if you ever were in Bethesda, then you were my psychiatrist.
Well, I would conspire, I would say, okay, they would send me because for some reason, for some young men, they would send to me, they could have just discharged them. They could have tried them, sent them to jail, whatever. But the ones they really valued, they would send to me, or I don't know why they sent them to me, really. But they arrived.
That absolutely tracks with me because I got caught. I got not caught. I got turned in on one of the witch hunts, and I attempted to commit suicide. I was a mess. I didn't want to go to I didn't want to go to Leavenworth. I didn't want to die like David did, this other sailor. So I was in Bethesda, and I knew I was going to get a less than honorable discharge. Probably not a dishonorable, because even then they weren't going to be that torturous to a suicidal kid and do that. But I did get a bad, a less than honorable discharge.
Administrative, what do they call it?
But my doctor, who I thought was gay, checked the box, clerical error, that I was honorably discharged, but not because anyway, which meant that I could get benefits when I finally got up to the point of trying to take care of my PTSD and reclaim my life. But I still had a less than honorable discharge. So he did a thing with the paperwork, and I know damn well he was gay, because in the group sessions, he'd look at me and he'd just look at me. And I'm going, there's something going on here, but I don't know.
I would try to play the system. Like if the kid wanted to get out, sometimes they just wanted to get out and they would say they were gay and I didn't know, and there's no way to tell. So I would just say, okay, just tell them you're gay. They'll let you out. They'll give you administrative discharge, or I would just hide it. And I would say, I don't know. He seems to have good marks from his command. Why? So it was like I was part of the mafia there, but I wasn't courageous. I wasn't courageous and say, hey, I'm part of the community too. Except our chief of service at Oak Knoll he was a captain. He was a gay art collector in San Francisco. And I got approached by psychiatry resident, one of them wanted to have sex with me. And he was married, and so was I. And I kind of regret that I didn't do it. He was cute. He was really, really nice. But yeah, so it's kind of a gay mafia. We sort of gathered as best we could and to avoid it. And Patrick, in our last podcast, you guys ought to check it out. Candace Winters was on there, and she was in the Navy later than all of us in the 2000s, I think. And this shit is still going on. They are still investigating. At least they were at that time. I don't know now. We haven't had. I'm looking for a veteran that was on, that has been current day after supposedly that there's no discrimination anymore. But I'm
afraid that we're going to.
She was a highly trained mechanic, was hounded out of the military.
I'm afraid that it's going to get worse now again. I'm beginning to have a flashback, if you will, anxiety around what is happening with the current administration and what's going to go down in the military. I know it's going to start up again.
The witch hunt for trans people now they're the ones that are the target now.
They're going to come for all of us. They're going to come for all of us.
Patrick, did you see, other than getting assaulted by some guy, did you see LGBTQ people in the military at all? Were they at all visible to you, around you?
No, not really. I've never had a conversation with any of them, secretly, because I was friendly with everybody. And so, yeah, I didn't see it. It was something that nobody would speak of where I was, especially in Vietnam. And it really didn't matter in Vietnam, because as long as he had your back, you didn't give a shit. You had his back, he's got your back, and that's the way it was. But I didn't know, I didn't even suspect, actually, of anybody in Vietnam that I was working with was gay.
Because if
And
you had, what would have happened? If you
as
thought
far as I'm concerned, nothing.
nothing,
Yeah, no.
how about as far as your command was concerned, as far as you know?
Um, I don't know about that. The command has never expressed we're, or anybody looking as in a witch hunt or anything like that. So I couldn't even have an opinion on that because never even realized. I mean, all the way through high school, I wasn't even aware of anybody being gay. And then I got into the military at 18, and I wasn't even aware of other than that guy. I knew he was, or had that opinion that he might be, or he was just a bully and just trying to demoralize me.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the Navy goes, not in my experience. No.
And it could be the Navy, what's the word for it? Maybe had, despite everything you said, Dave, and in my experience, may have tolerated it more. I don't know. Because I wonder about just David. Did you ever get physical threats from other sailors or?
No, no. But I'm also pretty passing. I don't portray gay, if you will. It's weird because obviously in my world, I created my own group, but I know that straight sailors would always make jokes about the yeoman or the even corpsmen. They would make jokes about us being gay, that rating. What are they called? The guys that hung out with the priest and the ministry, those guys.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
there were those three categories that
The
I would
chaplain's
hear.
assistant, or
Chaplain, assistant. So it's chaplains, yeomen, and corpsmen. That was the joke that I would hear all the time and all the command that I was in. That's where the gays were. So Patrick, you were naive, I guess, but that was the environment that I observed was where everybody in the military would make that joke about it. It was definitely, it was part of the witch hunt, but it was also just part of the, okay, guess what?
it's a
The yeoman's
culture.
probably a fag. So
Yeah.
what? So it was mildly tolerated, although aggressively searched out by command or a CID or whatever the Secret Service was called in those days in the military.
Shit.
CID, that was it. Yeah,
Yep.
CID.
Criminal Investigation Department.
That's who
They
came after me.
they came after me when I had that experience in
For what?
Vietnam.
What were they coming after you for?
Well, as soon as I got back to the Arvin base that we worked out of after that incident with the child and the guy in the sampan, uh, I would say half hour after we got back to the base, a black helicopter landed. They got out, about 4 officers, and they split the entire team up and interrogated everybody and got their mindset. Because I told it was just my sniper and me that did any firing. And they got the story from everybody else and then us. And they cleared us and they said, okay, you guys tomorrow go back to your base. Don't worry about it. This is being handled. As far as the record goes, 2 KIAs go down on paper of VC. And there was nothing said after that. This was a good kill. Go back to your base. That warped my mind. That really warped my mind.
If you
Yeah.
take 500,000 people, young men, and you put them in the jungle in a war situation, and then you put on top of it this huge bureaucracy, and you put on top of that the whole political situation that was going on in America. So you're not supposed to kill children.
All right.
Put in a situation where you might kill a child, and then you, by mistake or otherwise, because of you're in a threatening situation, and then you're going to be investigated for it. Well, the good
Absolutely.
news is you didn't get blamed for it. That was the good news.
Yeah. They said right up front, we don't want another My whatever.
Right. We don't want bad publicity.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. And so, and then we put you in a hospital ship, and we submit you get to see hundreds of dead people and dying young men. And but we're really concerned about your sexual orientation. It's an odd, because the whole political system gets laid, and the moral system gets laid right on top. My prayer is that the soldiers and sailors and Marines now are not operating under that kind of situation. But I don't know if it's true, and I'm hoping in our future podcasts we'll get some young people that are willing to really share what it is like now. If you know anybody, let us know. But I want to thank both of you, Dave, Lara, and Patrick McGrath. Thank you for serving America, for showing up and suiting up and going through what you went through, and for talking about it. I really appreciate it. And to those of you who are listening, just ask that you will forgive and provide the support for our military people that come home from all of this, because we sent them there. We sent them there. We asked them to do their job. These two men did their job. Many of those people were LGBTQ people. Some of them died in prison. I didn't know that one, Dave. That's a horror story. Many of them had their lives ruined from bad discharges. Many people from the LGBTQ community and from not. Good soldiers, good sailors like Patrick came home with lots of emotional baggage and lots of physical baggage. And we hope that America will continue to support them with the best care and then our love for what they did. If you want to read a story about two gay men who found each other in combat, pick up Love and Country, the novel that I wrote. If you want to see the movie about that, the one that Patrick worked on, Catch Love and Country, it's on Amazon and Tubi right now. And we hope you'll join us again for our next podcast. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.